Hi Flashes, this is Mrs. Reed. We are going to be going through the geometric figures practice test. So the first one here says, what is the classification of the angle shown? So our angle is right here, and as you can see, it's a very, very tiny angle, and that angle is going to be less than 90 degrees, which means that it's going to be an acute angle. Number 2, what is the value of x? So remember with these, you need to first figure out, are these complementary angles or are these supplementary angles? And if you see these two angles form a straight line, so remember a straight line is our supplementary angles. And then you just need to remember, were supplementary angles equal to 90 degrees or were they equal to 180? Well, if we have a straight line, that means that these are going to be equal to that 180 degrees. So if you want to solve for x, you know that you need to set your equation equal to 180 because it forms that straight line. So we're going to set it equal to 180. And remember, the definition of supplementary angles is when you take the sum of the two angles and set it equal to 180. So sum means that we are adding. So all that we're going to do is we're going to add the 5x plus the 140 and set it equal to 180. And then we just solve this like a basic equation. So first step is subtract that 140 on both sides. We get 5x equals 40. And then divide both sides by 5, and you get 8. So you divide it by 5 on both sides, and we got x is equal to 8, because 40 divided by 5 is 8. All right, next one, what is the value of x in the figure at the right? So if you notice that these two angles, this angle and this angle, are right across from each other. So these are not complementary or supplementary. They're what we call vertical angles. And what we know about vertical angles is that vertical angles are congruent. And if you remember congruent, if I can spell correctly there, congruent means that they are the same. So if they're the same, that means that we can just set these two angles equal to each other and then just solve for x like normal. So all I have to do here is set 2x equals to 60, because is set 2x equals to 60 because, again, as we know, vertical angles are congruent, so we can just set them equal to each other to solve for x. So all I have to do here is divide by 2 on both sides, and we get x equals 30. So your answer here should be D. Okay, next one. If angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles, and measure of angle 1 is 27 degrees, what is the measure of angle 2? So we kind of already talked about supplementary angles. Remember, supplementary angles is when your angles are equal to 180 degrees. So if your angles must equal 180 and you already have one that is 27 degrees, and you're trying to figure out 27 plus what will give you that 180, well, you can just subtract these. So just take the 180 minus 27, and we get 153, which is H. Okay, next one. A building is 120 meters tall. A scale model of the building uses a scale of 1 centimeter equals 6 meters. How tall is the model? So this lesson, I told my students, whenever you see your scale, so they say that the scale was 1 centimeter equals 6 meters, that is always your first fraction in the proportion. So you have your 1 centimeter over your 6 meters. Okay? Because again, like I tell my students all the time, whenever you guys see 3 numbers in a problem, more than likely you're going to be setting up some type of proportion. So you're just trying to get everything lined up. So since they gave you the scale is going to be the first thing that you put in your proportion. Then you're trying to figure out, where is this other number going to go? Well, if this is talking about the actual height of the building, so it's 120 meters tall, the actual height is always going to go in the denominator. And another thing that you could have used was the units. So since this was talking about meters and the 6 was talking about meters, you want to make sure that the meters get lined up. Okay, so this is how your proportion should be set up. So let's go ahead and solve it. So 6 times x is 6x. 120 times 1 is 120. And then your last step is to divide by that 6 on both sides, and you should get x is equal to 20. But you have to be careful here because there's 2 20s. One of them is centimeters, one of them is meters. So if we are trying to remember the model, since we had x on top here, was talking about centimeters. So that means that our value down here also has to be centimeters as well. So your answer here should be A. Okay, and the last one here on this front page, which pair of angles is congruent? So looking here at F, it says angle 1 and angle 2, and if you notice, angle 1 and angle 2 are right next to each other, which means that they are adjacent angles, and we know that adjacent angles are not congruent because we are adding the angles together, and it should equal 180 or 90. So those are not congruent. Looking at angle 1 and angle 4, once again, they're right next to each other, so that means that they're adjacent, which means that they're not congruent. H is angle 4 and angle 3, so angle 4 and angle 3 once again are right next to each other, so they are adjacent, which means that they're not congruent. So it looks like our answer is going to be 4 and 2, and if you notice, 4 and 2 are opposite of each other, which means that these are vertical angles, and we do know that vertical angles are congruent, so our answer here should be I. Okay? So if you guys haven't noticed, it is super important that you guys know your vocabulary for this test, because if you guys don't know what vertical angles mean, what adjacent angle means, what supplementary, complementary, if you guys don't know what those mean, then it is going to be hard for you guys to do this test, because that's mostly what this test is talking about. Like, there was supplementary, there's the word congruent. You have to know that supplementary angles form 180 degrees. There's vertical angles again. So you just need to know your vocabulary, okay? All right, next page. So on a scale drawing, 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. What are the dimensions on the scale for a room that is 27 feet by 20 feet? So you guys had one of these on one of your homework assignments that I gave, and if you guys remember, the dimensions is talking about the length of the room here. It's saying that it's 27 feet by 20 feet. And we have a scale that is 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. And they're wanting to know what are the dimensions for that room, okay, if I had this scale. So we're trying to figure out the dimensions of the model, okay? So to do this, we are trying to figure out 2 different things. So here would be my model. We are trying to figure out what is the length of the model and what is the width of the model. So there's actually going to be 2 different proportions that we need to set up to get those dimensions, okay? So the first thing that I need to set up is my scale again. So remember, your scale is always the first fraction in your proportion. So you're going to have this 1/4 inch over 1 foot. And then it does not matter which one you do first. So let's say we are trying to find the length first, so this x here. So the number that I need that's going to be corresponding with the x is that 27. And since 20 actual goes on the bottom, and then your variable goes up top. Okay, so let's solve it. So 1 times x is 1x, and 27 times 1/4 is 6.75. So the length of this model is going to be that 6.75 inches. But again, they're wanting to know the dimension, so they are wanting to know the length and the width. So we just found the length, now we need to find the width of our model, okay? So again, start with your scale and the proportions. So you have the 1/4 inch over 1 foot. And then now since we're using y, I'm going to set y as my variable, and it's going to be over this 20 feet. Okay, so again, just cross multiply. So 1 times y is 1y, and 20 times 1/4 is 5. So your width is going to be equal to 5. So since they're asking for the dimensions, it is important that you write it in dimension form. So like how they did here, the 27 feet by 20 feet, that's how you want to write this as your dimensions. So it should be the 6.75 inches by 5 inches. So as you guys can see, sometimes drawing pictures can help out a lot, but just remember that dimensions, you need to find 2 different answers to get the length and the width of it, okay? All right, moving on to number 8. So a model of a building is made using a scale of 1 inch equals 20 feet. What is the height of the actual building if the height of the model is 10.5 inches? Okay. So again, you recognize those 3 numbers. So first thing that we should probably do is set up a proportion, okay? Remember, your scale is always going to be the first part of your proportion. And then you just need to figure out where is this other number going to go. Well, remember, in your proportion, it's always going to be the model over the actual. So since the 10.5 inches was talking about the model is the number that goes in the numerator. So the 10.5 should go up here on top, and then your x should go down there at the bottom. Then all you have to do from here is just cross multiply and divide. So okay, so cross multiply, so 1 times x is 1x, and 20 times 10.5 is 210. And then you could technically divide by 1 on both sides, but you're just going to get that 210 again. So your answer is 210. And then since we were finding the actual, it was talking about feet. So your answer is 210 feet. All right, we are going to skip 9 through 11. That is something that we did not teach this year because it's not a 7th grade standard anymore. So we are going to move down to number 12. So number 12, use the figure shown to set up a proportion to find the height of the tree. So here we have 2 similar figures, and we are trying to find the height of the tree over here. So in my video that I talked about with this lesson, remember you always want to put your variable in the top left corner of your proportion. And then you want to pick the number that's in that same triangle, and it does not matter if they give you multiple ones, which one you pick. So since H is over here in the big triangle, the only other number that they gave us is 24. So that's the number that should go down here at the bottom. And then you just need its corresponding sides to the small triangle to set up your second proportion over here. So since H was talking about the height of the tree, you need the height of the wall, which is going to be that 4 feet. And then since 24 was talking about the shadow, you want the shadow of the wall over here, which is going to be the 6 feet. So after you have it set up, we can just go ahead and solve it. So 6 times H is 6H. 24 times 4 is 96. So when you divide both sides by 6, you get H is equal to 16. So that tree is 16 feet tall. All right, now on to our last page. All right, so here's another example of similar figures. So here, once again, we're trying to find the height of the tree. However, if you guys notice, all of our units here are in feet. Besides the height of the girl, it says that she's 4 feet 10 inches. So we have to be careful when we have that 10 inches because since everything is in feet here, we want to keep everything in feet. So I'm going to change this 4 feet 10 inches into all feet. So if you remember, there's 12 inches in a foot. So since we have 10 inches, that's not really a foot because we're 2 inches away. So what we can do though to change it into feet is to just change that 10 inches to 10 over 12 inches so that can at least give us our approximate of how many feet that is. So if I were to take 10 divided by 12, it's about 0.83 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this 4 feet 10 inches to the 4.83 feet. On your guys' test, you guys won't have one like that. You'll have nice numbers to work with, so don't worry about if you're confused about this part, okay? All right. So now let's go ahead and start setting up our proportion. So again, wherever your variable is and what you're trying to find, I want that number in the top left corner of your proportion. And then I want you to pick some other number that's in that same triangle. So since X was talking about the height of the tree, and that's talking about the big triangle, I need the other number that's talking about the big triangle. And if you notice here, it's talking about the height of the shadow of the tree, which is that 125 feet. Okay? Then you just need to find your other numbers that were corresponding sides to it. So if X was talking about the height of the tree, you need the height of the girl. And again, I'm going to use the 4.83 to talk about the height of the girl. And then your denominator, since the 125 was talking about the shadow of the tree, you need the shadow of the girl here, which is 5.5 feet. Okay? So once you have your proportion, go ahead and solve. So 5.5 times x is 5.5x. 125 times 4.83 is 603.75, and then to get x by itself, you just divide by that 5.5 on both sides. And then you get approximately we'll just round it to the nearest tenth, so 8 feet. All right, now we are going to start finding x in some different vertical angles, complementary angles, and supplementary angles. So the very first thing that you need to do if you're finding a missing variable in these problems is to first figure out, are you dealing with vertical angles, complementary angles, or supplementary angles? Because the thing to remember about these is if you're dealing with vertical angles, you want to set your equations equal to each other because we know that vertical angles are congruent. And congruent means that they are the same. So you just want to set your angles equal to each other. If you have complementary angles, remember, complementary angles, I want you to remember corner, because C and C, they both start with the letter C. And corner has that box in the corner, which means that it's going to be 90 degrees. And then if you have supplementary angles, I want you to think of straight line. And the easy way to remember that is both of them start with the letter S. And remember, a straight line is 180 degrees. So if you have vertical angles, you're setting the two angles equal to each other. So we're going to put equal over here. If you have complementary or supplementary angles, you want the sum, so you're going to add the two angles together, and then you're either going to set it equal to 90 or 180, okay? All right, so look at the first example. So identify, are these vertical angles, complementary angles, or supplementary angles? Well, they are opposite of each other. So if they're opposite of each other, that means that these are vertical angles. So as we know, vertical angles are congruent. So we are going to set those two angles equal to each other to get our value of x. So 3x equals 84. And then to get x by itself, you only have to divide by 3 on both sides. So then 84 divided by 3 gives us a value of 28. All right, moving on to number 15. So again, identify if these are vertical angles, complementary angles, or supplementary angles. So here we have a corner because it has the box in the corner. So if you remember, complementary angles corner is going to equal 90 degrees, and we want to take the sum of the angles. So the sum means that we are adding the two angles together, so 4x plus 46, and it's going to equal that 90-degree right angle. So once you have it set up, just solve it. So first step is subtracting 46 from both sides. We get 4x equals, x is 44. And then our last step is to divide by that 4 on both sides, and we're going to get x is equal to 11. Okay, next one. 5x and 75. So first identify, are these vertical angles, complementary angles, or supplementary angles? Well, if you notice, they are opposite of each other. So since they are opposite of each other, that means that these are vertical angles. And again, vertical angles means that they are congruent, so we're going to set them equal to each other. So our equation is going to be 5x equals 75. So to get x by itself, all that we need to do is divide by 5 on both sides, and 75 divided by 5 gives us a value of 15. All right, and then the last one. So given the angles are supplementary, find the value of x. So again, supplementary is straight line. So it is going to equal 180, and we are taking the sum of the angles. So sum means adding, so I'm going to add the two angle measures here. So I'm going to add 5x plus 95, and again they are supplementary, which means that it's going to equal the 180. All right, so solve for x. First step, subtract that 95 on both sides. And we get 5x is equal to 85. And then our last step to get x by itself is to divide by that 5 on both sides. And 85 divided by 5 gives us a value of 17. All right, so please let your teacher know if you guys have any questions, and I hope that you guys study hard for this test, because we only have this test left and then the final. So good luck, guys.